Here's a short tutorial for the original CorridorKey from Niko. This is the GitHub page you should be familiar with. All the instructions are at the bottom on how to install and how it is working. But here's a short video tutorial so you can see it in action. Easiest way is to click on this code button and then download the zip file. I already did this, so I just unzip it. And now we have this CorridorKey main folder. And first thing we do is start the batch file, install CorridorKey windows.bat. Just double click, confirm. And this will now download and install everything you need to have to be able to run it. When it's done, as you can see, just hit enter and the installation is complete. It has now downloaded all the files it needs to run, and we can now use it by dragging files onto this CorridorKey drag clips here local.bat. I have some demo files here, and you see I have a QuickTime video. This is an UHD file. It's actually in linear color space, that's why it's so dark. It's a 4-second clip. One thing many people get wrong: they take the clip and drag the clip, just like the file name says, drag clips here onto this batch file. I'll do that, run it. And first start maybe a bit slower, but you will soon see we will run into an error message. And here you see we get this error message that our directory name is invalid. So CorridorKey does not work with dragging video files directly onto the batch file. The trick here is to put the video file into its own folder. So I just create a new folder. Let's say my shot, and I copy the file into this folder here. Now I can drag this folder onto the batch file, just like before, and run it again, and now it should work just fine. And you see, we get the smart wizard, and it now asks if it should create the folder structure, which we want. So enter Y for yes. And just so you understand what's happening, in this folder I created is now a new folder with the name of our shot. And inside you find the video file and also other folders that have been created already, like the alpha hint folder. If we now look into the wizard here, you can see we have an input. We have one clip, shot linear, but we do not have an alpha hint. And now we have the option to generate an alpha hint or put our own alpha hint into the folder structure to skip that step. I show you both scenarios. So what I now do is go back to my demo files, and you can see I have another folder called alpha hint. This is a rough alpha mask I did beforehand with Blackmagic Fusion using the delta keyer. This is the reference CorridorKey needs. I can now copy the files from the folder into the alpha hint folder which CorridorKey created. I paste the files here, and now I have the option, as you can see, to enter the letter R to rescan my folder structure. And you can see now it says ready alpha hint 1, since I provided the alpha hint information myself. And now I could start the inference, meaning the actual processing of my shot, which would be I for run inference. But to show you the other scenario, I will now delete all the files in this folder and enter R to rescan again. And you see alpha hint is missing, and now I get the other options. In my case, I did not install any of the tools like Video Mama or GVM because I'm using ByRefNet, which is also an option here. So I enter the letter B, and now I'm being asked what version of ByRefNet or what model I want to use. In my case, I use number 4, General Light, so it's quite fast, just for demonstration purposes. So enter 4, hit enter, leave everything at its default, and then yes to run ByRefNet. This may take a moment, and then it will create the alphabet we just have seen automatically. ByRefNet seems to be trained on people. So in many cases, you might lose stuff you actually want in the frame. For example, in my demo shot, we have this control panel the 2 people are sitting on. And in any version of ByRefNet, this control panel will be removed. So I just get the people. So in that case, if you run into this trouble, maybe it's better to generate your own alpha hint, just to make sure you include the things you want in the final shot. You see, it's done, batch complete. Press enter to rescan. And again, we see we have this alpha hint. And now I can run the letter I for the inference, meaning the actual processing of my footage. And we get asked a few questions. I told you in the beginning, my shot is in linear color space or linear gamma. So I have to enter linear at this point. If you do not know what linear means, it's highly likely your shot is in sRGB, meaning a simple shot which can be viewed on any monitor without any kind of transformation. So in that case, just press enter to use sRGB as the default value. I have to use linear. Next question is the display strength. I will leave it at the medium setting, which should work fine for most cases. Otherwise, if you think you still have green spill in your footage, you can enter a higher value, or if it gets too magenta or red, you can enter a lower value. So leaving it at 5 means just pressing enter. Auto despeckle, as you can see, removes the tracking dots. If you have tracking marker on your green screen, you should enter yes. In my case, I don't have any tracking marker, so I enter N for no. The refiner strength multiplier should remain at 1, so just press enter without changing it. And now the program is running. And how long it will take is highly dependable on your PC. So what kind of hardware you have, what kind of graphics card with how much VRAM. In my case, it's really slow because I'm just using a rather old RTX 2080 with 8 GB of VRAM. So for me, it will take roughly 10 to 15 minutes to process these 100 frames or 4 seconds of footage. As you can see, it takes quite a while. So just for the sake of this tutorial, I will not let it run through all 100 frames. I give it like 10 frames. That's enough to look at the rest of the process. As you can see, we reached 10 frames. That's enough for us. You can interrupt the inference process by pressing Ctrl+C while you are in this terminal window. And it will ask you if you want to terminate the batch job. Enter yes. And we are done for the moment. So I go back into my shot here And you can see we now have an output folder which has been generated. And here you find the processed files. So here you have this comp, the foreground, the mat, and the processed. And you can see we have our image sequence in EXR. So to work with our files, I will use Davinci Resolve because you can download the free version, so it should be available for anyone. I've started a blank project, and what I will do now is just drag my processed folder into Davinci Resolve, just here into the media pool. And this should give me one file as an image sequence. Just in case if this doesn't work and you get a folder or you get the single files and not an image sequence, you can switch to the media page. And in this media storage panel under these three dots, you can go to frame display mode. And here you can say if you want individual, sequence or auto. So put it on sequence and it should import just like it did here for me. I go back to the edit page and just drag my little sequence here into the timeline. And you can see we have our keyed footage. But just like I said in the beginning, my footage is linear, so it's way too dark. And the same thing is true for CorridorKey when you use the processed file, because it's also in linear no matter what your input footage is. So if you just use sRGB footage, the processed EXR file will still be in linear gamma and needs to be processed in your video editing software to look correct. In Resolve we have several ways to do it. I show you the two common ones. The first one is using color management. You find it on this cog here below in the project settings. Go to color management here on the left side. And under color science, switch to YRGB color manage. And for our case, it's okay to use automatic color management. Maybe switch to HDR for the processing. But our output color space should be SDR Rec 709. Click Save. Nothing changes, because we still need to tell Resolve that this file is in linear gamma. So in the media pool, I right click on my image sequence and go down to input color space. And here I select linear and then linear. And you see the footage gets normalized and now it looks correct. So now I have my keyed footage. I can just put it on a second track. And for example, under effects, I just put a solid color generator below it. And if I change the color to some gray, for example, you see we have this keyed footage. If you do not want to work with color management, there's another way. So I will just go back to YRGB, so no color management, and set it back to Rec 709 and Rec 709. And again, our footage is too dark, but I can now go to the color page. And on the color page, I can use in the effects library, you find it here under effects. Under Resolve VFX color, you find the color space transform, and you can drag it on an empty node. And here we say sRGB for the input color space, and for the input gamma, we go to linear. Since we already said that our timeline is Rec 709, it's getting changed automatically, but you can also, to be safe, enter Rec 709 on both these fields, and you again get your footage normalized. That's about it. That's a general process to work with your files. Maybe in a last step, we can take a short look at the other outputs. We also have the foreground and the matte. Comp is just a preview that is not meant to be used in production in any shape or form. But we can take a look at the foreground and the matte. So if you drag the foreground into Resolve, you see it's actually sRGB. So this might be somewhat confusing. The foreground layer will be sRGB from CorridorKey. The processed one will be linear. And you also get this matte. I just put it on top. And you see this is the actual transparency information generated by CorridorKey. And this can be used to basically key out this version of the foreground. But that also means you have to do the processing of despill and things like that yourself. As you can see, this foreground matte actually has the green spill still within the footage. One way to go about it is in Davinci Resolve. While you're on this shot, you can go to the Fusion page. In my case, my Fusion is configured to be vertical, not horizontal. And also you might see two viewers. Mine are stacked vertically, so I just use the one for now. So this is the foreground. You can now open the media pool and drag the matte image sequence into Fusion. If you want to view the matte, just drag it onto the viewer so you can see the matte, or drag the foreground layer to see the foreground layer. One way to use the matte is to use the matte control node. So I click on the media in, I add the matte control, and from the out point of this matte, I do a right click, hold and drag onto the matte control. Let go, and now I can select what input I want to use. And in our case, I want to use the garbage matte. I will drag the media out to see the result, and you see everything is gone because I have to configure the matte control. Under garbage matte, if you open this panel, one thing we have to do is change the channel from alpha, because this matte does not have an alpha channel. It just has white and black information. So this is actually a luma matte. This might confuse some people because we always talk about alpha matte and alpha hint. But what we get is an luma matte. So the channel we want to use is luminance. And you can see it's actually inverted, so we need to invert the garbage matte. And you can see now our foreground footage has been again keyed using this matte, and we get this transparency in the background. So now that we have this transparency information, we can either combine our footage here on the Fusion page with our background. For example, I will just create a background node, change its color to gray just like before. And now I will just drag the output of the matte control onto the output of the background. So I automatically get a merge node. And I did it because the one you drag onto the other will be the foreground. Now I can drag the output of the merge onto the input of the media out. And you see we actually have our composited shot. But just like I said before, we have this green spill because it's not included in the foreground render from CorridorKey. One way to solve it is to place a despill node before our matte control. So after the media in, if you hit Shift and spacebar, you get this pop-up where you can enter commands for different nodes. So I'm looking for despill, and you see there's the despill tool. I click on add and it will be added into the signal chain, and you can see it already removed the green. Key color green, strength 1, and now my green spill is gone. So now we have our own little keying operation done using the foreground and the matte provided by CorridorKey. If I go back to the edit page, you can see our finished shot. So that's about it. I hope this was helpful for anyone trying to get started with CorridorKey. Just play around with it and have fun.